What do you think about the term, and I'm thinking of a reaction, every action has a reaction, the term the woke right?
What do you mean, what do I think about it?
Well, because it's been controversial just in itself, isn't it? People are saying that it doesn't exist, it doesn't mean anything. People are saying it should be called the dissident right or all sorts of other things. Do you think woke right is accurate?
Yes.
And because a lot of people listening won't know about that as a notion.
Yeah, it's a term that actually, I think James Lindsay gives me the credit for coming up with it, and I give him the credit, but I think we kind of came up with it at the same time. I definitely think there's a woke right, and I think it's quite clear. Now, what do we mean by woke? Woke is, in my opinion, first and foremost, an obsession with group-based victimology. In other words, saying, we live in a society in which my group are victims, and it's very important that we identify around our group identity and our victimhood. And we are aware in a very special way, in a way that most people are not, just how oppressed we are. And now on a group basis, we've got to go and use authoritarian means usually to do something about that. That's what I always thought about as wokeness. There's definitely a woke right. And if you pay any attention to what's happening online, you can see it very clearly. And by the way, another reason I like to call it the woke right is, having coined the term, I now feel exactly the same way as I felt in 2018 when we started Triggernometry, where we were operating in an incredibly woke comedy industry. And lots of people would be like, oh yeah, I agree with you, but I'm not going to say anything. Like, that's exactly what's happening. Not only that, I know someone who keeps making content online, quite famous and well known, who keeps making content about how the woke right doesn't exist and all of that, who told me in a private conversation that he actually thinks it exists.
That's mental, though.
No, it's not.
I think that's mental.
But that's exactly what happened with the woke. Do you not remember? There were all these people who pretended to have an opinion in public because they knew that they would be punished by the authoritarians on their side for denying a thing that everybody knew was going on.
But pretending to have an opinion if somebody asks you about it or whatever, or just putting up a black square or something is one thing, but making content particularly aimed at sort of, oh, the woke right isn't real, and then secretly telling you they think it is.
Well,
I think you should have a word with Francis about that. I think one example of it, I was just reading your brilliant book. It's really good. What's the name of it?
An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West.
I was loving it. I want everybody to read it.
So good that you forgot the name.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I knew that was a name, but I'm so scared of ever saying like a name of a thing in case
I know the feeling exactly. It's really worrying.
You tell me the name of your thing, because if I get it wrong, bloody hell.
Yeah.
But you mentioned, I didn't even know about this, but Bernie Sanders back in the day going around Russia sort of showing off how...
Soviet Union.
Yes, showing off how wonderful it was. And we've just seen Tucker Carlson do that. And you think one would be sort of the far left and one would be the far right.
Yeah.
And is that where there's a kind of woke right going on?
It's a great comparison. One I like even more is George Bernard Shaw, because he went over to the Soviet Union and went for a 3-hour interview with Stalin.
Right. Wow.
And he came away from that. I wrote, actually, when I came up in my own head, at least with the term woke right, there may well have been loads of other people who'd been using it, and I just unconsciously picked it up. But I wrote an article, I think it's one of the most read and viewed. So I make articles into videos called Tucker Carlson and the Woke Right after he went over to Russia.
I read that.
And I basically made the comparison that George Bernard Shaw went over to the Soviet Union because he had this idea of the Soviet Union and Russia in his head as this place that did not suffer from the ills of democracy. Right? They were able to do things. They were not watching their culture disintegrate. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And Tucker Carlson is exactly the same. So I think there are lots of pretty valid comparisons to be made. Now, the reason people get very upset about this phrase is A, it's 100% accurate, and B, it is kind of designed to insult them, because it's saying, look at what you've become. You banged on for years about the importance of treating people as individuals and not canceling people and whatever. When I wrote that article about Tucker Carlson, I was instantly disinvited from a thing that I was going to that evening. Wow. So there is a lot of this happening on the right, and a lot of people are pretending it's not going on. Look, I'm not particularly driving some kind of agenda with it. There's, James Lindsay, for example, he's spends his days tweeting about it, and good for him. I think it's important to highlight it. I've said what I said in exactly the way that I said it in 2018 about the woke left. People are going to catch up over time, because they're not going to be able to ignore that this thing's real. It's going to get worse.
I suppose, I mean, one argument that could be against it, and I like using woke right, I think for the same reason, because it's sort of, it annoys people and it shows them the hypocrisy because they were having I do like that. But I suppose if tribal authoritarianism or tribal or group victimhood were a band and it was releasing lots of different albums, I feel like maybe you could say woke was one iteration of that. But they've been. They
behave in exactly the same ways.
But so have every kind of tribal group in history. I mean, the Nazis did that. The Stasi did it. The Bolsheviks. It was all sort of a group grievance. So maybe it's just woke was that particular album. Stasi was another album, and so on.
I see what you're saying. I don't think there's any contradiction between what you're saying and what I'm saying.
No. I think it still can be used, but I can see why some people will go, well, okay, woke was one of it. Woke was a particular blue-haired kind.
If you think of woke in that way, I can see why it doesn't make sense. But I explained to you what I think of woke as, and I think therefore the comparison is valid.
What do you think about something that's been not necessarily bothering me, but intriguing me? I think you and I and the Andrew Doyles of this world who might see ourselves maybe as liberals or just broadly, I don't even know what, but just individuals who are trying to navigate this world, sort of aligned ourselves in this fight against wokeness with a contingent of maybe, what would you call them, religious fundamentalists maybe. Is there now, just like how the sort of the woke left sort of started to split, are we about to maybe split in the coming years?
I have never aligned myself with anyone in that sense. I've always the one thing I've kept telling people consistently through the ages, I am not your ally, and I've been telling them that because I knew this moment was coming, and this moment was coming not just with this group of people that you're talking about. It was also coming with gender critical feminists, right? Like gender critical feminists were fighting a very important fight about the trans issue. You've covered it extensively, right, on this channel.
Yeah.
It was an important. Sorry, I'm just teasing you, mate. But
yeah.
As have we. Like,
well, you know what though? I think, I mean, you guys did earlier on, didn't you?
Yeah.
And then I did, and I think both of us probably came to that same feeling of like, oh gosh, you know what? I think I've said everything and
understood everything. Yeah. Like for us, it was a genuine attempt to understand what was going on. I think for you as well.
Yeah.
And once you get to that point, it's like you're okay. Well, now we know what we think about it, right? But anyway, my point is, I always made it clear to them that I am not a feminist of the type that they are. I'm like, women, equal opportunities, equal rights, whatever. Is that realistically likely to happen in our society? Probably not, because women are mothers. But I don't hate men, and I don't like people who hate men. And among gender critical feminists, there are many people who do hate men. It's just a fact, right? Yeah. So I always kept reminding them, I'm not on your team. I'm also not on the ethno-nationalist team or the religious team. That said, I really don't have any problem with religious people in general. I actually, the more older I get, the more I think religion is valuable. And I certainly don't turn my nose up at people. Fundamentalists of every kind I dislike. And if they're religious, they tend to be a little bit more confident about their fundamentalism. That said, James also said something on our podcast that I've been thinking about in relation to the woke right. He said, if you fear the religious right, just wait until you meet the post-religious right. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing in some ways. But yeah, so I understand your point entirely, which is it has felt to many people that we have been in alliance with some people and that alliance is now splitting. My attitude in trigonometry in terms of my own stuff that I say has always been the same. It's that great quote from, I think it's a British Foreign Secretary, I think. Lord Palmer, is it?
Yeah.
Who said, we have no permanent alliances. We have only permanent interests. And to them, it is to them that we owe allegiance. My interest is in trying to understand the world, trying to speak the truth as best I can, try and make as few mistakes as possible, try and be wrong as rarely as possible, even though I will be wrong a lot. And so I never signed up to be like part of like team right wing. So when I have been saying for the last 6 years or however long it's been, 7 years, that I'm not right wing, I was saying it to both sides. I was saying it to the left, who wanted to use the term right wing to accuse me of being a bad person, and therefore they could dismiss everything I was saying and not have to listen to. I was saying, no, I'm not right wing, right? Like, pay attention to what I'm actually telling you. And I was also saying it to the people on the right. Like, I will disappoint you at some point because I don't agree with you on everything and I don't plan to.
Well, that disappointing of them is the splintering I'm talking about.
Yeah,
even though you never committed to it.
Yeah, but that's their problem. I told them. Yeah, I told them up front.
But I'm just asking if it's happening.
I think it's happening with some people, but I also, my experience is, we get lost in these like extreme ends of the conversation online where like there's this group over here that don't like, and there's this group over here. And actually, I find that the majority of our audience, those of them that are center right, are perfectly content with the fact that Francis and I are more to the center than them. And those of them that are center left are content that we're more to the center than them as well. And that's one of the things that I think the internet is one of the joys of the internet is it allows people, it's also one of the problems with the internet, but it's also one of the joys. It allows people to really find people who match the way they see the world in some way. And the way we see the world is we really try to have conversations with different types of people who have different views. And we wanted to build an audience of people who are interested in that. If you want the same culture war slop that there are other people who will provide it for you, that's out there. And I call it slop because it's a term I'm seeing a lot right now in the kind of social discussions on Twitter and whatever, because that is what's happening. But if that's the kind of content you want, that's great. It's just not what I'm interested in making. And if that's not for you, like, I don't know how you feel about it, but for me, I've always thought about, like, look, man, life is kind of short, and I don't want to spend my life making things that I don't think are good things and I don't believe in order to what? To make more money, to get a bigger audience, to have a higher status. Those are not good trade-offs for me, especially now that Triggernometry has got, reasonable size and it kind of sustains itself. Like we will have someone on the left on one week and on the right the next, and a comedian who takes the piss out of us the next, and it works for us. So I'm really like, I really couldn't give a shit about anyone splintering. Like, okay, I don't care.